Hey guys, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. This is Jeff checking in again. We're continuing with our video book and audiobook. My apologies for missing the last couple days, but we're going to continue on with everything. And again, this is from Meditations for the Independent Poet, a book of essays about that link between art, poetry, and business. We're going to do a couple sections today. We're going to start off with riff number 78. It starts with a quote from Marcus Aurelius. For any action, ask if death would be horrible to take this away. There's an idea that a piece of art's never finished, only abandoned. Adding another layer of shading is simple. There's a line break to move. The video could pan to the left more. The song could tweak a verse. At some point, an obsession over details is a fear to deliver. At some point, there's a need to publish, post, reveal, ship. The independent poet faces danger not only with the writing, but the business. It's easier to dwell on tasks to keep busy than tasks that yield results. Without focus, it becomes easy to confuse exhausting and productive. A tiring day can be less effective than an energizing hour. In most cases, a business will survive if the video isn't posted today or if the photo isn't shared. The submission could wait another day. The tracker could be tracked tomorrow. This is not to favor an action. This is to favor action that makes more tangible difference. Finishing a book gives more to a world than finishing an email. Hosting the event creates more connection than perfecting the script. The independent poet separates the moves that lead to independence from the moves that are chained to distraction. Moving on to our next little riff. This is a longer one. This is number 77. Quote from Marcus Aurelius. Here is no different than there. What is here is on top of the mountain. The average independent poets, after the full-time job, has submissions to prepare, performs poems at the occasional feature, and tames the dream of being able to live on poetry, which has slim chance of ever coming to fruition. The average independent poet uses poetry to solve clients' pain, is dependent on finding people to be helped, and at times writes not in the direction of personal interest, but in the interest of the world the poetry serves. The independent poet may also submit and perform. Dependent or independent, there will be tasks a poet takes on that they may not wish to. The advantage of most dependent poets is the ability to poet as desired without pressure. The dependent poet can create solely in self-interest. Because most poetry revolves around traditionally dependent poets, the system is readily trained to praise and assign prestige to the smaller number of poets. Poets who win awards, prizes, and opportunities. The advantage of most independent poets is the ability to forge a life around poetry on terms the poet dictates. The offer created around poetry is one of the poet's making. The independent poet can build more of a life around poetry as career and art intertwine. It's not necessary to have certain credentials. It's not necessary to apply for opportunities that have a high chance of rejection. It's not necessary to turn to relationships with bigger names in the industry. In fact, the audience for the independent poet may not even be poets. The timeline for acceptance or rejection can also be much faster. Some calls with a potential client can immediately end with an acceptance of an offer or a rejection. The disadvantage of the dependent poet is the reliance on factors that aren't controllable. The submission gets rejected. The response time for the grant takes months, not to mention the funding can disappear. The contest only selects a single winner. The book does not come out at the poet's discretion, if at all. Because the dependent poet also needs to take care of the housing, family, and other needs, the danger of pushing poetry to the side is real. The limited amount of awards, funding, and opportunity means a select, small groups of poets receive the majority of the largest accolades. It's a circle that's difficult to enter, especially if a poet hasn't developed relationships with poets farther along in the field. For many dependent poets, their readers will be other poets. Reaching a wider audience is challenging. The disadvantage of the independent poet is the direction of some of the art is less self-serving because the poetry is more focused on the needs of others. Creative and financial independence means developing an offer people derive so much value from that they're willing to pay for it. The poet, therefore, has to be in tune with their audience's needs and respond accordingly, or their business will fail. The independent poet also operates diametrically in a traditional art world. Prestige is typically assigned to artists who operate by traditional, established means. A self-published poet is still less likely to receive the recognition as a collection by a press. Winners of the most well-known awards in literature skew heavily towards poets with a background in academia and traditional publishing. Regardless of the path a poet takes, whether dependent or independent or a mixture of the two, the challenges to overcome are neither insignificant nor insurmountable. I've got one more clip for us to take a look at. Or one more riff, I should say. Let's take a look at riff number 76. A quote by Marcus Aurelius. Talking about how a man should act is useless compared to acting how a man should act. When poets say they wish they could spend all day writing, I really hear two statements. A poet does not spend all day writing, and also the poet is not actively finding a way to spend all day writing. I have no issue with the first statement. The poet has a job, a kid at home to take care of, dishes to wash, laundry, an evening out with friends. The second is the problem. This year, there are more ways that writing can find people in a meaningful way than ever before. There's no need to be hired by a publication editor. There are no job applications I need to apply to. Though they may not be reading the way people did in the past, there are more people reading than ever before in history. A poet who wishes to spend all day writing is a poet who avoids the responsibility of spending all day writing. The responsibility is not easy, of course. A poet has to write in a way that connects with a specific audience deeply. The writing becomes of service and must impact enough people to be sustainable. If I only wish to write about what I wish to write about, that's fine. I just need to reach enough people who would be interested. Each of these elements takes work, but the good news is work does not mean impossible to achieve. However, work might mean more effort than I am willing to put in. All right. With that, thank you guys for hanging out with me. A couple more riffs. What's up to Kathy? Thank you for the kind words. All right. I will see you guys later. Hope you guys have a good day. Have a good night and a good afternoon.